Alright, so today is a slightly different video. So I was just browsing Reddit hardware swap and saw this ad posted. Generally, I only buy computer parts and build them into computer, but today I found a deal on a fully built computer that was simply too good to pass up. This is one of those deals that only comes by once every few months and gets snatched up right away. After looking at the spec list, I calculated potential loss was about $100 and the potential upside was about $400. So I decided to message the guy and meet him up right away. The meetup spot was only about a 30-minute drive. I highly recommend only ever meeting in public places and in broad daylight when making any kinds of a transaction. So these are general guidelines I follow when purchasing a computer from someone. I find out why they're selling the computer for this price. Some people will give you a BS answer, but if you ask the right question, you'll be able to get the real answer. Ask questions that will gauge their computer knowledge. Usually the more someone knows about computer, the less likely they will sell you a computer at a good price. Inspect the computer to verify all the parts listed are accounted for. Make sure that high-value items such as the GPU is there. So following my own guidelines at the meetup, I found out the guy was selling the computer because he became a father and no longer had time to play games anymore. I thought this was a good reason since I previously purchased computer from people for a great price with a very similar reasons. The person had limited knowledge about computers. Inspecting the computer, I noticed the GPU was plugged in a less optimal spot. After doing some research later on, I found out both the slots were PCIe Gen 4, so this was actually fine. The cable management was average, and there were some dust buildup in the case. Also, two of the back panels were missing. I also found out at this time the owner left a second 1TB SSD inside the computer. He said I could keep it, and at this point I was ecstatic and went through with the purchase. As soon as I brought the computer home, I installed drivers as well as my benchmarking tools. I went into the BIOS and reset everything to default. I started with Cinebench R20 run and verified the CPU was working as expected. Next, I ran Heaven benchmark and everything was fine until this happened. At this point I was in denial and decided to run Heaven again. Sure enough, the GPU started stuttering and crashing. I texted the owner to find out what's going on. As I was waiting for a reply, I reinstalled the drivers and swapped the power supply for a 750 watt platinum one. I previously owned this exact model of 1080 Ti, and it was crashing when I was using a 700 watt bronze power supply, but once I swapped over to a 650 watt gold power supply, that resolved the issue. I was really hoping this would fix the problem. Needless to say, that did not happen, and it was back to the drawing board for now. This was about an hour after I texted the owner and I finally got a reply. He told me to underclock the GPU with Afterburner by 100 MHz. I did this and was able to do a full Heaven run without any issues. So now I was left with a tough choice. Do I return the computer or do I keep it knowing that there's an issue with the GPU? I compared the performance of the underclocked 1080 Ti against another 1080 Ti that I had. The performance was close enough. At this point, I already narrowed the problem down to two causes. It's either one, silicon degradation, which is something I couldn't fix, or thermal issues, which is something I could fix. I noticed that during Heaven benchmark and while gaming, the GPU sat around 83 degrees Celsius. The GPU was also downclocking to stay within thermal limits. I decided at this point to take apart the GPU and redo the thermal paste, hoping that will fix the issue. As soon as I took the cooler off, I could see that the thermal paste was completely dry. I tried to take the cable out, but it wouldn't budge. Concerned about damaging the cable, I decided to leave it on. I cleaned up the old thermal paste the best I could using isopropyl alcohol. I took it outside and blew off as much of the dust as possible. I applied a thin layer of new thermal paste and spread it as evenly as possible. Putting the GPU back together was pretty simple. It was only secure with 4 screws. I threw it back in the computer and crossed my fingers. First thing I tried was Heaven Benchmark, which plays with flying colors. The GPU stayed below 67 degrees Celsius the entire time and achieved a score of 3750, which was 750 higher than the previous run with the underclocked 1080 Ti. Next I played Apex Legends for an hour and I didn't see any performance issue. The GPU also stayed cool at below 68 degrees Celsius the entire time. I just wanted to address one thing that's been on my mind, which was if the owner knew the issue when he sold the computer to me, or did he just think that this was normal function? I don't want to speculate too much, but this serves as a warning of what could happen when you're buying used computers. That's probably one of the reasons why I prefer to buy individual parts instead of a full computer. At least this story ended up in my favor. So now I'm going to take the computer apart and use it for different builds. I paid $920 for the entire system, and here I broke down the cost of each component. I also listed what the current used market price for each item would be in my area. This gave me a potential profit of $460, making this one of the most profitable transactions I made this month. Please let me know if y'all like this kind of content by either liking this video or commenting below. I'll try to post a new video every other week. If you enjoy this kind of content, please consider subscribing. But that's it for today. Thanks for watching.